Our topic today is waking up to injustice and stepping up to social reform, and our wonderful speaker is Jacqui Miller. I would like to share with you why we are doing these Lead Montessori community conversations and why Lead Montessori came to be. So just bear with me. The reason why we want to do that is because there are some people who were not present at our conferences before or who may not know exactly what Lead Montessori is. So we decided that every time we do a conversation, we'll share at least the basics of our story. So here's the story of Lead Montessori. And it's especially for those of you who are new to our community that we want to share this story so that you know what our values are and why we are here. Lead Montessori started as a conference for Montessori school principals, school leaders, managers, or other leaders in Montessori movement just about 2.5 years ago. And in the fall of 2018 and in the fall of 2019, there was a conference held in Prague for people who wanted to be part of this community. It was obvious from the beginning that there was a huge need for Montessori leaders to connect, and we have created a very tight, wonderful community of colleagues from all over the world right from the start. As many of you know, when COVID happened, it seemed more important than ever that we continued to connect, to share, and to support each other. So that's the reason why we created these Lead Montessori community conversations. And we have actually met every week on Thursday at 4 o'clock of the Central European time in Prague ever since then, ever since April 7th of 2020. As the time passed, it became more and more apparent that our Lead Montessori community is a very unique organization, and that this community is also very closely connected. So we are global, but we are also very close, and we have very close relationships. It seems that more and more people have become drawn by these gatherings. So since just about 11 weeks ago, close to 1,000 people, 1,000 individual people joined us for these conversations. People are coming and connecting with us, or we are connecting with each other literally from all over the world. So since we started doing this work, our values, our shared values, our community values have evolved. We deeply respect, cherish, and affirm people from all continents and all countries of the world. We welcome all perspectives, and we welcome and cherish the rich cultural, religious, linguistic, racial, and ethnic diversity of each person who comes to this community. We value our meetings on a weekly basis because we are able to build personal and collegial relationships with each other. We make the effort to get to know each other. We make the effort to learn from each other. We keep a dialogue going, which creates compassion and empathy. This is who we are as Lead Montessori. We believe that the more we talk and communicate, the more we appreciate each other's perspectives and opinions and the unique experience we each bring to our Montessori work. The more we appreciate each other, the more we grow and more move forward, both individually and as a movement. It is very simple. We connect, we spend time together, we have dialogue, we share. We endeavor to be open and vulnerable to each other. So, as we have just shared this with you, we will ask you to kindly respect these values and of open and deeply respectful conversation for today and for all of our conversations in the future. So please, together with us, acknowledge the value of our community by connecting with each other openly, by speaking to each other respectfully when it's time to speak, and by being kind to each other. Please stay muted for the time when Jacqui speaks, And please discuss and share by raising your hand, either your blue hand on Zoom or hand on the screen, which we can see. If you have feedback that you want to give to us, which we very much welcome, please give it directly to us. You can share it here in chat, or you can write it to us at Lead Montessori later. We will always respond in kind. And last but not least, please remember that all of us who are here do the best that we can. If we come together in this way, we can create a great capacity for positive change in this world. Thank you. I know that was a little bit long, but we thought it was very important that we share with you what our values are, and that everybody who is here shares those values with us. So thank you for listening. Jacqui, thank you again for coming, and please, would you share with us today? Thank you.
Absolutely. Whew. It's morning where I am, so I don't pretend to be an expert, so I appreciate how many faces I recognize and how many people are in this this audience today. So I don't feel like I'm a presenter. I feel like I'm talking with colleagues, and so I appreciate the opportunity to share my perspective. And I really appreciate that the context of Lead Montessori, and really admire this kind of a forum. You know, as we are living in this space of uncertainty, connecting is so important. So I'm just really grateful and humbled and honored to be here. In this work, it is important to start with our identity. It is important to acknowledge and see one another. So I like to start presentations just by sharing a little bit about me, so that you know the lens through which I see the world and move through the world, and the perspective that I am bringing. So and identity is an important thing, and the topic today is waking up to injustice and then stepping into social reform. So the Montessori piece of who we are and what we do depends so much on how we understand ourselves and who we know ourselves to be. So I am in the process of coming to know myself and claiming different parts of my identity. This list is a little bit different every time I talk, but I want to just start here. So I am bicultural and bilingual. I used to say that I am biracial, but in my current evolution, I am striving to dismantle the concept of race. So I won't claim being biracial, because we are one race, human race, and biologically we are more alike than different, and yet it's our differences that make us unique and that are important to see and to claim. So I am of African American and German heritage. Those are both powerful cultures. My parents were very intentional about making sure that I was connected to those both of those parts of who I am. Those are my beautiful parents there. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. So waking up to injustice, and it is a process. And so I want to start by saying that that is an important, I appreciate, America, that you said we'll be respectful and gentle with each other. It is a process of unfolding, and we are all in a different place along this pathway. Okay, so my identity. These are the lovely people who gave me life. My father is of African-American descent, born in Mississippi, son of a sharecropper. So we are, I'm a descendant of enslaved people. My mother is from Germany. She was a child during World War II, so she has that experience of injustice as part of her makeup and who she has become. She's now an American citizen. And so a little further down there, I do identify as American. I'm a global citizen. My father was in the military. That's how they met. And I spent a good deal of time in Europe. And as I was saying, my parents made sure that I understood both of my my cultural lineage. And I do speak German. And mommy made sure that I was able to do that and continue to have connections with family in Europe. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I identify first and foremost as an educator. I used to claim Montessorian, and I am a Montessorian deep in my heart. The means of education that I ascribe to and value and love and trust and completely am committed to is Montessori. But my role as an educator is bigger than that. There are more ways and opportunities to educate than in a classroom, and I'll talk a little bit more about the role that Montessori plays and how it informs the way we move through the world. I am an optimist. I am absolutely an optimist. I know that we can do better. I know that we can always grow, and I know that there is creativity and resourcefulness in humanity that we can solve most any problem. I appreciate, Mirka, that you mentioned vulnerability. This is a space, being human, being in touch with ourselves as humans, there is vulnerability in that. So I'm working hard to cultivate that. I had to grab my tissues. Those of you who know me know that I am very in touch with my emotions and will get emotional at times. So, and I also want to acknowledge my privilege, right? I move through the world as an African-American woman. I don't always, people don't always have to notice that. I have a lot of privilege. I have a lot of the characteristics that are readily accepted in the global majority and in the dominant culture. And so I am not the kind of Black person that necessarily jogs people's sensibilities about differences in race. And so that affords me a lot of privilege, right? My life has been privileged. I am, I am not suffering financially, not well-to-do, let's not get that confused, but I absolutely have means and am comfortable in my lifestyle. I'm educated, I have a loving family, and I am part of an important, purposeful community. So I have many aspects of privilege that allow me to experience the world in the way that I do, and I don't take those for granted, and it is important to acknowledge and recognize those. Okay. So then I'm speaking to you today from a specific perspective in my work right now. This is my current story, and my current work is here in Cleveland, Ohio, Stonebrook Montessori. We just completed our 5th year as a public charter school. We will be merging with the school district this coming year, so we will continue to be a public school. That has been important from the beginning. We are an intentional community. We're an intentional school that is striving for access. The Glenville neighborhood where we are is predominantly African American, predominantly low income. It is an area of the city of Cleveland that is receiving economic stimulus and economic development supports, but there has been a legacy of divesting. A lot of resources have left this community, and there is an intentional effort to try to re-establish this as a thriving community. It has an incredible history. So we are here very intentionally. And this has been an important part of my work. Previously, my work was with adolescents, and that opened my mind. Working with a third plane in Montessori requires us as the adults, to be in touch with reality, the reality of the world that the young people are going to take part in very soon, to be in touch with it and to be honest about it and to see it in ways that have to be very, very real if we are in fact going to do our job of preparing our adolescents, that third plane young person, to move into society, to become a change agent. And so I took that very seriously. And through my work with adolescents, I started to see systems at work in our world that opened my eyes, and it was not what I had been taught, and it was not what I had learned, and not necessarily a lived experience. And so it has been an important, that set the tone for me to open my eyes, to begin waking up and paying attention to what was happening in the world. So it started with my understanding of the physical world, moved into the social world. I made a commitment to providing access because Montessori is wonderful and needs to be more available. And it brought me into proximity. And so I want to talk about this word proximity a little bit, because we can I think one of the things we need to pay attention to in this time is what is our lived experience? What do we know? And to move from wherever we currently are to greater knowing and greater understanding of both the world and people in the world, because what we are proximate to, what we have direct contact with and direct knowledge of, informs our worldview. And so moving out of whatever is our comfort zone, whatever is our known community, our known experience, into connection, direct connection with other communities, other aspects of the world, is important for understanding. We can only do a surface level of work if everything is an abstraction. And so whatever that looks like for each person is for you to determine how is it that you can move into a space of deeper understanding of other people's experience, lived experience in the world. So this opportunity to live here and serve in this community in Cleveland has been really transformative. And so I'm in this process of awakening and a personal transformation. The more I know, the more I am compelled to do, and the more I am finding myself living into the philosophy that Maria Montessori offered for us to think about education as a means to social reform. So these beautiful people are the beautiful little beings who walk through our doors every day. Up in the top corner there is, that's the current leadership team of Stonebrook Montessori, and I put them there because we're hearing a lot of things in the world right now, the term allies, right? There is injustice specifically in the Black community that needs to be addressed, right? Anti-Black racism is real and needs to be addressed. And there is a role for everyone to play. And there is a term that I like that is co-conspirators. And I just want to share those lovely people, and there will be some pictures throughout of other people who are in this work. I'm here to share, but this is certainly not my thing. There's an incredible team of people who every day commit themselves to really moving and really changing reality for our population. So while I feel like I feel like this is a moment for us to recognize that everything around race and equity and social justice is in fact global. This is a human condition, and there is humanity is what's at stake. But I will be speaking from the specific perspective of Black Americans who are right now the group that I am called to serve. So I proposed 3 questions for us to talk about, for me to share a little bit about, and then for us to discuss a little bit further. And the first one is, there is this narrative that is coming to light. More and more people are talking, more and more vocabulary is available, more and more norms of how we interact and talk with each other are coming to light around the injustices that are real as a part of humanity. So I want to put this in the context of our experience at Stonebrook and how it has uncovered, right, as I am learning a new narrative. We all are subject to what we know and what is the overarching predominant narrative that is out there, and part of our responsibility is to change that narrative, interact with it in a way that it is real. And so when we opened Stonebrook, this was opening day, we were committed to equality. Stonebrook is a beautiful building. There was a significant capital campaign, lots of philanthropic support in the Cleveland community to create a beautiful, prepared environment for children. Debbie Hershey-Gurin and David Kahn were big parts of, were the idea, right? They were the founding team of Stonebrook, and from the very beginning, there was no question that what we were going to provide for this community was going to be equal in value to any Montessori school out there. It was going to be as beautiful. It was going to be as fully supplied with materials. We were going to have everything and do everything and give our children the very best because they deserve it. And so we started with equality, with this idea that our school would be just like any other Montessori school that you walked into. We were not going to water anything down. This is what we have to offer, and our children are worthy. What we came to realize, what I came to realize, is that Montessori, and so I brought what I knew, I brought my experience. We had all trained teachers in the very beginning, and we came to do what we had always done, right? The equality was important, and it was our driving force. We came to realize that it was not enough. It was not magic. It didn't automatically translate and meet the needs of the children we were serving. And we, and I'm grateful for the courageous people who are on this team here, because as soon as we heard ourselves saying things about the children, because the children weren't doing what they needed to do or weren't responding in the right ways, as soon as we started hearing ourselves blaming children, we quickly stepped back and said, wait, that's not who we are. That's not what Montessori calls us to do. And so we began to become aware quickly that there are prerequisites. There is privilege embedded in the way Montessori is practiced, such that it fits well and meets the needs of a certain group of children. Scientific pedagogy is how Montessori came about, and it has grown in this country in a particular subset of communities, and bringing all of those same skills and tools and practices to low-income African-American children. It was not having the same effect. And so we had to stop and think about, what do we mean by the universal child? Do we know what that means? Do we understand that as, in that same way that humanity, right, is more alike than different? Do we understand the universal child to say children have the same needs, but there are differences? And it causes us to examine what I think Montessori, I think our opportunity right now is to quickly move past the colorblind space, right? We are good at multicultural celebrations and acknowledgments of different cultures, and yet in the Black community, that same approach to needing to change things, needing to meet children where they are, wasn't natural. It was challenging. The children were showing up and they were asking us to follow them in a different way than we had followed the children that we served in other spaces. So colorblind is problematic, and our universal child is problematic if we don't see the differences. Right? We cannot let it make everybody the same. Everyone is not the same. And that's where equity comes in. We move from equality to everybody getting the same, which already we would need to do a lot of work in this country, because Montessori is not readily available to certain groups of children and families and communities. But then we have to go that next step of really looking at equity, and that their needs are different, and therefore we need to respond to them. Montessori is a developmental pedagogy, and it is a needs-based. We look at the needs and characteristics of the children we serve, and then we tailor what we do. We respond to their needs. And that has been a 5-year process that is unfolding and continues to unfold, because the needs are complex. They are very complex. So just acknowledging those differences and moving from equality to equity requires a shift in thinking. And it really requires us to think about culture, and what does culture mean? Montessori calls us to support children in their development so that they are adapted to their time and place. And what does that mean? What do we need to know then as adults about this time and place, such that we can prepare environments that help children, in fact, adapt to their culture? That is their immediate culture of their home life, school life, but then also the bigger context of the of citizenship of wherever they might be, and then extending that to citizens of the world. So one of the things we recognized, and I have recognized, I attended an anti-bias, anti-racist workshop led by a group called Crossroads, And this was at a Montessori for Social Justice conference in Boston several years ago. And it clarified some things for me. So again, I'm being vulnerable in my own waking up and my own evolution of understanding what is happening and what do we need to be aware of around the injustices. And there is a big distinction between personal and systemic, right? If we are thinking of racism and injustice as personal, as being attached to certain people, we're missing the point, and we will never be effective in reaching the kind of global equity and equality and justice for people that is needed, because it is not an individual, it's not a personal thing. The problem is systemic. And it goes back to the root cause, I believe, is the construct of race. And race is a human construct. It's something that people came up with, and they came up with it in order to privilege certain groups of people over others. And so embedded in the concept of race is the concept of racism, because that is why it was even invented as a social construct, was to be able to offer privileges to certain groups of people. And that's what the word, the term white supremacy is loaded, and it activates people's feelings. And but it is simply the outcome of a system, a structural concept that says certain people will get certain privileges and are elevated, right, in society, and others are disadvantaged. And so that is real. It is real, and it is pervasive. And that is a fundamental understanding. And if we cannot embrace that, then we will only go so far with the justice that is begging to happen right now in this time. Now, where the personal comes in, I would suggest, is that that is the solution, right? The solution to systemic injustices is personal responsibility, and that people change systems. People created systems, right? People create systems, people can change systems. And so we can't wait for the government to make different decisions. We have to take responsibility. And that's what we're seeing right now in this time, is many people hearing a call, moving into a space where they are ready to take some kind of personal responsibility. Specifically in Montessori, I think we sometimes let ourselves think that Montessori is about children and peace in the future, and we don't look at the reality of our current opportunity for all of us to serve the bigger call of Montessori, which is social reform. It's not somewhere in the future, it's current, and there is a call to become anti-biased, to become anti-racist. And for a long time, I resisted that, because I like to be for something. I don't do well with that negative energy of being against something. But structural injustices there is no neutral position, and it's not effective to be for something until you have dismantled and been against the thing that is in the way of the thing you want. So as Montessorians, we are working toward peace. We are working toward social reform and dignity and justice for all of humanity. Being for that is important, but it's not going to get us anywhere until we can break down the barriers to that. And so the need to take on the challenge and the task to be anti this thing that is getting in our way, to be against and dismantling the structures that are perpetuating this inequality, has to come first. We can do both. We can certainly do them both at the same time, but we have to acknowledge that we've got to break down the systems that are so pervasive and so have such wide-ranging impact. Can you tell that this little one is a troublemaker that absolutely has my heart? Can you tell by that face? You can tell by that face. That's my little sweetheart. I've come across the work of a woman named Zaretta Hammond. She is she's an educator and a researcher, and she has written a book called Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. And she makes the point that our school system, specifically public education in the United States, and I will say that education in general has this similar construct. And it's just one example of systems that are inequitable by design. okay? It is not an accident, and it's not a few people, and it's not a couple of problems. We're seeing this right now. COVID-19 brought to the forefront that our healthcare systems are unjust, right? And by design, there are problems in our healthcare system. Police brutality. We're looking at the system of justice in this country for sure, and acknowledging that it is unjust by design. Education is another one of those systems. All of the systems that we experience, housing, one of the things that we recognize with our children is that the impact on their lives and their well-being is tied to where they live, what education their parents have, what their neighborhood feels like. And so housing has been a big thing. Redlining, there's a lot to learn about how there are systems of injustice everywhere, and they overlap. And some people are at the intersection of so many of them that the odds are stacked against them in pretty significant ways. So the recognition that the school system is inequitable by design means we have to redesign it. It doesn't, you can't go in and make small changes. We have to recognize that it is not an accident, that it is by design. You know, so she has these 5 presuppositions that she says, you know, we have to understand these if we're going to be able to move forward and make change. I put them here just as a reference to be able to say that Montessori is outside of public education. It is a reform movement in education, and yet it is, I think, also a victim of some of the systems and some of the expectations, and some of, if not education directly, we're striving to be anti-racist in our education. We also have to acknowledge that and be vigilant about the places where other systems and remnants of the educational system are at work, okay? So public education was designed to produce different categories of society. Some people who would be able to achieve and move through other opportunities in life, and some who would stay in the status of support workers. And you know, a lot of our essential workers now have been, you know, it's been clear who is in which categories of opportunity. And so she talks a lot about the opportunity gap in the United States. There's lots of data that shows that children of the global majority, Black children, brown children, Indigenous children, do not achieve according to the school system and what they measure in the same ways that white children do. And so unpacking that and trying to get to the root of what is driving that is important. And her work is very important in that way, in that it is grounded in brain development. It's very, very compatible with Montessori and the way that education should be responsive to the culture of the children who are being served. Okay. And so this last one I think is really important. Culturally responsive pedagogy is focused on counteracting the system's efforts to underdevelop diverse students' cognitive skills, not simply boosting their self-esteem. She's very intentional around unleashing and tapping into the potential of the child. And that has to be done in a way that is culturally responsive. Gloria Ladson-Billings has done a lot of work as well. She's a resource around culturally responsive teaching, and they point out that doesn't just mean responding to Black and brown children. It means acknowledging that the way education works is culturally responsive to the dominant white culture. And so then there need to be modifications and acknowledgement of that when serving other children. She also gives us this image of culture, and it was a little while into into our work here at Stonebrook that I realized, oh, Montessori is its own culture, right? We have many of the components of what go into a culture. We have certain words that we use, we have certain practices, we have certain rituals. So Montessori is absolutely a culture. And so how does it respond to cultures the various cultures of the children that we are serving. And I like this. Culture is often shown as an iceberg, like tip of the iceberg. And she has created this another image, which is this tree with surface culture at the top, and then the components of shallow culture and then deep culture. And that sometimes when we find, and what we're finding right now, and needing to take into account, is that our Montessori schools may not be responding to the culture of the children we are serving, and we don't have enough Montessori schools serving children of certain cultures. So there's a lot here to unpack for us as Montessorians around serving children and what we know about culture and how important culture is in our work. And I'm embarrassingly noticing that I did not fill in a quote right there. So sorry about that one. I know there are lots of good quotes around Montessori and adapting to culture. And there are some really important components in here that are things that we may not even really think about. I want to point out this concept of self, right? That one of the deep cultural components is the concept of self and a worldview and decision-making processes. These are things that are unique to people who walk through the world with different cultural backgrounds. And again, I'll just say it again, I think we understand that well when it comes to ethnicities and different countries, but there's a special something that happens here in the United States where the cultural identity of Black Americans is not respected and honored in that same way. And it goes back to the very deep roots of how this country was founded and the role that Africans played in that development and the dehumanizing structures that brought us here and have been part of the experience of Black people in this country for sure. And there are analogies, not quite as dramatic, because this was a very special, the United States came up with a very special brand of slavery that is not, it just doesn't exist anywhere else. But there are inequities, there are cultural differences, and there are privileged and underprivileged groups in most places in the world. So that's a little bit about the narrative, and there's a lot there, right? It takes a lot, and it takes a lot of time to unpack all of those things. And so that's just a little bit of a sample of what it will take, and that's first, right? That's first, because then being called to do something without a real understanding of what is needing to be done and how we got where we are, then I don't think we can be very effective as change agents if we don't have a deep understanding and a real, honest understanding of where we are and how we got here. So then the next thing that I hope we're all feeling, and if you're here today, I'm assuming that you are feeling some call to action and wondering what is ours specifically as Montessorians to do. And I will acknowledge that Montessori for Social Justice is a group of Montessorians, grassroots organization that started asking that question collectively and very, very boldly in 2014 with annual conferences and an annual time to come together and really ask these questions. And so as I was thinking about what are some of the things that we as Montessorians can do, these are all things that call us to live into the pedagogy, right? Again, Montessori is about social reform. Education is a means to that end. And so we are in service of change in our society. And if what we're doing is maintaining status quo, then I don't think we're being authentic to our pedagogy. I think we are not answering the call of Montessori if we are simply maintaining status quo and not being very adamant and very active in changing what is unjust. So I think we should spend more time talking about the Montessori movement than about the Montessori method. I think we have privileged and elevated the method of what happens in a classroom, the technical skills of Montessori, over the big picture call of Montessori to move toward a more just world. there was a Montessori for Social Justice theme. I have a t-shirt for every one of these. These are awesome. But to embrace the revolution, right? Montessori is a movement. Do we know how to be a movement? Where are the organizers? Where are the people who, and the strategies? What are our organizations, our Montessori organizations, doing to be mobilizing a movement? Right? It's sort of fallen into the background. It's a catchy phrase. We're a peaceful revolution. And that's an action, right? That's a verb. That's a thing that has to happen. It has to be real intentional. So I hope that we can lean into Montessori as a movement and really respond to this time. I think we need to, I'm convinced we need to commit to educating the human potential of Black and Indigenous and children of color. I read something beautiful, someone shared something with me yesterday that said, you know, when we Montessorians talk about the child, pause for a moment and think about what's the image of a child that pops into your mind when we talk about the child. And we could put something in our minds if we can say we're educating the potential of Black, Indigenous, and children of color as well. It starts to make our brain recognize, oh, yes, it's all children. We say it, are we actually doing it, right? The theme here is that we as Montessorians, what I think we're being called to do is to critically analyze everything that we say. We have all the right words. We have the vision from an incredible visionary. Are we doing it? Right? This is a time of self-examination because those systems of injustice are pervasive and they're unconscious, right? I didn't talk about implicit bias, but they are, we don't even know them, we don't even see them, but we have control over that. We can educate ourselves, we can know them, and we have a responsibility to do so. So there was a beautiful theme one year was decolonizing the human potential. And we have to examine what are the impacts of colonization. And again, that was a global perspective. What are the impacts and implications of colonization? And the human potential is not being, you know, the achievement gap to me is a data point on untapped human potential. If there are children in large numbers in certain populations there who are underachieving, that is untapped human potential, and our world does not get to benefit from their brilliance and their genius. Acknowledging the connection between peace and justice, right? We claim peace. Peace is our goal and our a founding, you know, a core of Montessori, and yet there is no peace without justice. You know, you're hearing it in the marches, in the streets. Malcolm X said it. Maria Montessori said it, and that takes work. And so to get to peace, if peace is our goal, we have to understand that that is an active process of getting there. Actually, my favorite MSJ theme was reclaiming Montessori for universal liberation. Okay. And then I think, you know, especially in primary, we've been recognizing the importance of identity formation and identity development in self-construction, especially in that first plane of development. We have a real responsibility in how we are preparing our environments so that children are developing a sense of identity that, again, counters some of the data that's out there. By age 3, you know, there are studies by 3, 4, 5, kids have an understanding already that they've absorbed from the world that white is better. There's the classic doll example of children, you know, choosing which doll is prettier. If they're given a white doll and a black doll, and they will choose the white one. There is much to do at that first plane of development to prepare environments so that children's identity, the identity of Black, Indigenous, and children of color, is forming in a whole and healthy way that is already having to counter the narrative that is out there that says that they are not worthy. And then, of course, it just continues through I think the elementary curriculum is beautiful and powerful. We have to do cosmic education really, really well, really intentionally. It sets the foundation for the work of justice and equality and humanity if and when we do it well. And then the adolescent work, absolutely. Participation in the world and becoming change agents becomes very, very critical. The prospect of true peace makes us turn our thoughts to the triumph of justice. and love among men, to the building of a better world where harmony reigns. This, that was our peace poll. We have a peace poll at Stonebrook, and I know that a lot of Montessori schools do that. So that's outside as you are walking in the building. And then inside we have this Dr. King quote hanging on the wall. And I do have the audacity to believe that people everywhere can have 3 meals a day in their bodies, education and culture in their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. That was in his speech, his Nobel Prize in 1964. We're still working on it. We're still working on it. But it is that audacity that I suggest should compel Montessorians. So the question for us to explore is, can we find the courage and the audacity and the humility and the vulnerability to critically examine our practices? And it has to start with us as individuals. We have to do our individual work. All of us have to know more about the way the world really works and the way that that things came to be. There is an origin story. There is a root analysis of most everything that will surprise most people. Our education systems that most of us were part of have not taught us what the world is really in need of. And so for us to prepare ourselves as adults, we have to do a lot of work. And then I think we have to pay attention to our immediate sphere of influence. Our specific schools, our families need to be the place where we courageously interact and courageously explore what we didn't know and what might be happening. And then we have our Montessori movement and the bigger movement that is happening in the world right now, calling for justice and equity in a way that we can contribute. Montessori is a scientific pedagogy. We need to be paying attention. We need to be collecting data. We need to be looking at the data that's already there and acknowledging where we're not yet doing our best. Montessori is not yet serving children as well as we could be, as many different kinds of people, and really contributing to a change to make the world a more just place. And I think that we have to be real careful about doing it right. I think in Montessori, again, there is a way that has come about, and it often feels judgmental and narrow and limited to do Montessori right? And we often say Montessori works if you do it right. But what does that mean? And if we could shift our focus to doing right by children and doing right, what is right, and really ground ourselves in our moral outcomes and on our moral imperatives of this work, then we would be more gentle with one another about what doing it right looks like, and we would grow our understanding of what makes it right. And I think we absolutely have to acknowledge trauma and toxic stress, and the fact that racism creates trauma. There is generational trauma. I think part of the narrative that we're hearing now that is so important to acknowledge is the generational trauma, and the fatigue that you're hearing from Black Americans, especially, saying, still, not, oh my gosh, look what's happening, but still, again, yep. And needing to acknowledge that it is time for healing and justice. So justice is an abstract concept, but know that there are real human beings, and that healing is a part of what has to happen. My little note is, recognize that this is a spiral. We're gonna think you figured some things out. You're gonna do some work, and then you're gonna realize, oh wait, there's more, and we're gonna loop through this. The idea of fractals, when you're having a conversation with one person, there's a bigger implication, and you could probably take so I just said that to my colleague. Where does that show up in the bigger picture? How can I extend this idea beyond this moment? I love this quote from Maria Montessori. This is from The Absorbent Mind. And it comes toward the end of the book. Which is the last chapters go back to the psychological point of view, urging on educators the supreme importance to the nation and to the world of the tasks imposed on them. They have a critical role and opportunity. Miseducation has gotten us here and has perpetuated systems, and now education has the opportunity to dismantle some of those systems and change things going forward. Not in the service of any political or social creed should the teacher work, but in the service of the complete human being, able to exercise in freedom a self-disciplined will and judgment, unperverted by prejudice and undistorted by fear. Prejudice and fear are real, and we have to acknowledge, we have to do our work for the children. So I would like to, I'm not sure, I have a feeling close to my end of my time, if not over it, but I want to share just a couple of minutes. This is a little end of the year video that was created here at Stonebrook, and these are our core values: peace, respect, work, justice, community, and joy are the core values of our school. And we tell our children all the time that they are worthy. And that is a counter narrative that we have committed to. So this little video is an end of the year piece that one of our teachers put together.
Hello. And today we're going to be reading this pledge. I am worthy of respect. I am worthy of respect. I am worthy of respect. I am worthy of peace. I am worthy of peace. I am worthy of work. 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 I am worthy of justice. I am worthy of justice. I'm worthy of justice. I'm worthy of community. I'm worthy of community. I'm worthy of community. I am worthy of joy. I am worthy of joy. I'm worthy of joy. I am worthy of joy. Thank you. You are worthy of respect. You are worthy of peace. You are worthy of community. You are worthy of joy. We are worthy of respect. We are worthy of peace. You are worthy of work. We are worthy of justice. We are worthy of community. We are worthy of community. We are worthy of joy.
So thank you for the time. Thank you for waking up, being willing to wake up. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for the stepping up that I know we're going to do together.